The sharp sound of a dart hitting the board echoed through the expensive office. Claire Bennett didn't even look up from her computer screen as she threw another one. This Monday morning ritual had become her favorite stress reliever. The target? A printed photo of her boss's face pinned to the dartboard. Thunk. Right between the eyebrows. "Good morning, Claire," came the deep voice from behind the mahogany desk. "Morning, Mr. Hartwell," she replied, adjusting her aim for the next throw. "Your coffee is ready. Black and bitter, just like your soul." Dominic Hartwell, 34 years old and worth more billions than most people could count, actually smiled. 3 years of working together had taught him that Claire was the only person in his empire who refused to be intimidated. She was also the only one he couldn't fire, because frankly, she was too good at her job. When brothers bring trouble. The office door burst open with dramatic flair. Julian Hartwell stumbled in, his designer suit wrinkled and his eyes wild with panic. He locked the door behind him with shaking hands. "Dom, I messed up. I really messed up this time." Claire sighed heavily. "What a surprise. Let me guess, gambling, women, or both?" "This isn't the time for your sarcasm, Claire," Julian snapped. "With you, it's always the time," she shot back, reaching for another dart. Dominic slowly closed his laptop. "What did you do, Julian?" His younger brother collapsed into the leather chair, sweat beading on his forehead. "Remember Vincent Kong? That eccentric billionaire who studies human behavior?" "No," Dominic said flatly. "Well, I met him in Monte Carlo last week. We got to talking, drinking, and then, gambling." Claire's dart paused mid-air. "Please tell me you didn't bet something stupid." "I bet 40% of Hartwell Industries." The silence that followed was deafening. The impossible proposal. Dominic rose from his chair with terrifying slowness. "You bet 40% of our company?" "I was winning. I had a royal flush." "How was I supposed to know he had a straight flush?" Julian's voice cracked with desperation. "This is insane, even for you," Claire muttered, finally setting down her darts. "Wait, there's more." Julian raised his hands defensively. Kong made a counteroffer. He'll forgive the entire debt if Dominic agrees to participate in one of his social experiments. Dominic's eyes narrowed dangerously. "What kind of experiment?" "You have to get married. To someone you hate. For 6 months." "Absolutely not." Julian pointed directly at Claire. "And you already have the perfect candidate." Claire's coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. "Excuse me?" "The business arrangement." "Think about it," Julian continued desperately. "You two have been bickering for 3 years. You can barely stand each other. It's perfect. Kong wants to prove that enemies can fall in love. You just pretend for 6 months, then divorce, and we keep the company." "I will not marry him," Claire stated firmly. "And I won't marry her," Dominic added with equal conviction. Julian looked between them hopefully. "But you both hate each other, right?" "Obviously," they said in unison. "See? You even agree on that. This could actually work." Claire's mind raced. She thought about her mother's medical bills, her sister's college tuition, and the mountain of debt she'd been drowning in for years. "How much?" she asked quietly. Dominic turned to her, surprised. "What? How much would you pay me to do this insane thing?" He calculated quickly. Losing 40% of his company would cost him billions. 100,000 a month. 200,000. Their eyes locked in a battle of wills. "Deal," Dominic said, extending his hand. Claire shook it firmly, both trying to display dominance. "Fine. But I have conditions." "So do I," he replied coolly. Julian clapped his hands together with relief. Wonderful. Just one tiny detail I forgot to mention. What? They demanded simultaneously. The wedding has to happen today. Kong arrives at 6 p.m. to meet the bride. Claire checked her watch. It's 11 in the morning. That gives us 7 hours, Dominic said, his mind already working through logistics. Claire, clear my schedule. We need a marriage license, a dress, and... I'm not wearing some ridiculous princess gown, she interrupted. I wouldn't dream of suggesting it. You'd look terrible in one anyway. Says the man who probably sleeps in his suit. At least I don't throw sharp objects at pictures of people. Only pictures of you, she corrected with a sweet smile. The race against time. 2 hours later, they stood in the city clerk's office, filling out their marriage license application. The elderly clerk reviewed their paperwork with a kind smile. First marriage for both of you? Yes, they answered together. How long have you been dating? Claire and Dominic looked at each other. 6 weeks, she said. 2 months, he said at the same time. The clerk raised an eyebrow. Which is it? 8 weeks, Claire corrected quickly. It just feels shorter because we're so happy. Right, darling? The endearment nearly choked Dominic. Absolutely. Time flies when you're happy. The clerk didn't look convinced but stamped their application anyway. Congratulations. You can pick up your license tomorrow morning. As they walked back to the car, neither spoke. The reality of what they were about to do was finally sinking in. This is completely insane, Claire finally said. Completely, Dominic agreed. We're really going to do this? He stopped walking and turned to face her. Are you having second thoughts? Claire thought about her family, her debts, and the strange man she'd spent 3 years both despising and grudgingly respecting. No. Are you? No. They stood there in the middle of the busy sidewalk, 2 people about to tie their lives together in the strangest business arrangement either had ever made. For what it's worth, Dominic said quietly, you're the only person I'd consider doing something this ridiculous with. Claire felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. Is that supposed to be a compliment? From me? Yes. She smiled despite herself. Then thank you. I think. As they continued to the car, neither noticed that their conversation had felt less like enemies negotiating and more like partners planning. Neither noticed that when Dominic opened the car door for her, it felt natural. Neither noticed that this arrangement was already more complicated than either of them had anticipated. Claire stood in the doorway of Dominic's penthouse, her suitcases at her feet, and tried not to let her jaw drop. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the entire city skyline. The furniture looked like it belonged in a design magazine. Everything was white, glass, and chrome, beautiful, expensive, and completely lifeless. Welcome home, Dominic said, though his tone suggested he was as uncomfortable with the word as she was. This place looks like a hotel lobby, Claire observed, walking inside. Do you actually live here, or do you just come here to stand dramatically by windows? I don't stand dramatically. You're literally doing it right now. He glanced down at himself, standing by the window, hands in pockets, gazing at the city. This is just standing. Dramatically, she finished, suppressing a smile. The bedroom problem. They carried her bags to the master bedroom, where another awkward reality hit them. So, Claire said, staring at the massive bed. Sleeping arrangements. There's a guest room down the hall, Dominic offered. Which Vincent Kong will find very suspicious when he shows up unannounced. We're supposed to be newlyweds madly in love, remember? Dominic loosened his tie, a nervous gesture Claire had never seen before. You're suggesting we share the bed? I'm suggesting we make it look like we share the bed. I'm not actually suggesting. She trailed off, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. You know what I mean. Right. Of course. He cleared his throat. The bed is big enough. We can put pillows between us. A whole wall of pillows, Claire agreed quickly. They stood there awkwardly until Dominic's phone buzzed. Kong just texted. He'll be here in an hour. An hour? Claire looked down at her jeans and sweater. I need to change. We need to look believable. What does believable look like? She grabbed his hand, examining his calluses and the way his fingers automatically curved around hers. Like this. Like we're comfortable touching each other. Dominic's breath caught. Her hand was smaller than his, warm and surprisingly soft. We should practice. Practice what? Being affectionate. The practice session. They spent the next 45 minutes in the most awkward rehearsal of their lives. They practiced holding hands, standing close together, and looking at each other without glaring. You're too stiff, Claire complained. Real couples don't stand like they're in a business meeting. I don't know how to not stand like this. Relax your shoulders. Breathe. Pretend you actually like me. Dominic forced his shoulders down. I'm trying. This is just weird. Tell me something real, Claire suggested suddenly. Something you've never told anyone. Maybe that'll help. He looked at her, surprised. Why would that help? Because real couples know each other's secrets. Come on, Dominic. Give me something. He was quiet for a long moment. I hate running the company sometimes. The pressure, the expectations, always having to be perfect. Sometimes I wish I could just disappear. Claire's expression softened. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard you say. Your turn. She hesitated, then spoke quietly. I'm terrified of being poor again. My family struggled so much when I was young. That's why I work so hard, save every penny. The idea of going back to that, it keeps me up at night. Their eyes met with new understanding. We're both just scared people pretending to be strong, Dominic said softly. Maybe that's why we fight so much. It's easier than being vulnerable. The doorbell rang, shattering the moment. Vincent's first visit. Vincent Kong was not what Claire expected. Instead of an intimidating mogul, a thin man in his 60s entered with curious, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. Mr. Hartwell, he said warmly, then turned to Claire. And you must be the bride. Vincent Kong, pleased to meet you. Claire Bennett, Claire Hartwell now, she said, stumbling over her new name. Dominic's arm slid around her waist, pulling her close. The gesture looked natural, protective. We just got back from the courthouse. How romantic, Vincent said, pulling out a small notebook. Tell me, how did you two fall in love? They'd prepared for this. Claire leaned into Dominic's side. It was gradual. We worked together for 3 years, fighting constantly. Until one night, Dominic continued, his thumb unconsciously rubbing circles on her hip, I realized I wasn't actually angry with her. I was frustrated because I cared what she thought. And when did you know? Vincent asked Claire. She looked up at Dominic, and the lie came out sounding surprisingly like truth. When he brought me coffee at 2 in the morning during a big project. He knew exactly how I liked it, 2 sugars, extra cream. He'd been paying attention for 3 years, and I'd never noticed. Dominic blinked, surprised by the specific detail she'd remembered from their actual working relationship. Vincent scribbled notes. And the arguing? Was just foreplay, they said together, then looked at each other in shock. Vincent's smile widened. Fascinating. I'll check in next week. Congratulations, you too. After he left. The moment the door closed, they sprang apart like they'd been electrocuted. That was, Claire started. Intense, Dominic finished. We were good though. Convincing. Very convincing. He paused. The coffee thing. You really remember how I take my coffee? You remember how I take mine, she countered. They stared at each other, both realizing they'd been paying far more attention than either wanted to admit. I should unpack, Claire said quickly. And I should work. I have emails. But neither moved. Dominic? Yes? Dominic forced his shoulders down. I'm trying. This is just weird. Tell me something real, Claire suggested suddenly. Something you've never told anyone. Maybe that'll help. He looked at her, surprised. Why would that help? Because real couples know each other's secrets. Come on, Dominic. Give me something. He was quiet for a long moment. I hate running the company sometimes. The pressure, the expectations, always having to be perfect. Sometimes I wish I could just disappear. Claire's expression softened. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard you say. Your turn. She hesitated, then spoke quietly. I'm terrified of being poor again. My family struggled so much when I was young. That's why I work so hard, save every penny. The idea of going back to that, it keeps me up at night. Their eyes met with new understanding. We're both just scared people pretending to be strong, Dominic said softly. Maybe that's why we fight so much. It's easier than being vulnerable. The doorbell rang, shattering the moment. Vincent's first visit. Vincent Kong was not what Claire expected. Instead of an intimidating mogul, a thin man in his 60s entered with curious, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. Mr. Hartwell, he said warmly, then turned to Claire. And you must be the bride. Vincent Kong, pleased to meet you. Claire Bennett, Claire Hartwell now, she said, stumbling over her new name. Dominic's arm slid around her waist, pulling her close. The gesture looked natural, protective. We just got back from the courthouse. How romantic, Vincent said, pulling out a small notebook. Tell me, how did you two fall in love? They'd prepared for this. Claire leaned into Dominic's side. It was gradual. We worked together for 3 years, fighting. Thank you. For doing this. For saving the company. You're paying me $200,000 a month. Don't get too grateful. Still. You didn't have to agree. She rolled onto her side, facing his direction despite the pillow wall. Why did you really choose me? Julian suggested it, but you could have refused. Dominic was quiet for so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, because you're the only person who's ever been real with me. Everyone else wants something or fears something. You just are yourself. I knew I could trust you to not make this more complicated than it needs to be. Oh, she whispered, her heart doing strange things in her chest. Go to sleep, Claire. Good night, Dominic. But as she drifted off, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that this arrangement was already far more complicated than either of them had planned. And the scariest part? She wasn't sure she minded. In the darkness, Dominic lay awake, acutely aware of Claire's breathing on the other side of the pillow wall. He'd told her the truth, she was the only person he trusted. But he'd left out the part about how her laugh made his bad days better, how he looked forward to their arguments, how the thought of 6 months with her didn't feel like a burden. It felt like possibility. 3 weeks and 5 days. That's how long Claire had been Mrs. Hartwell, and she was losing her mind in the most unexpected way possible. Not because living with Dominic was unbearable, that would have been easier to handle. No, she was losing it because living with him was wonderful, comfortable, and terrifyingly natural. Every morning started the same way. She'd wake to find his side of the bed empty but still warm, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen. She'd shuffle out in one of his old college shirts she'd borrowed and never returned, to find him already dressed in a sharp suit, making breakfast. "Morning," he'd say without looking up, sliding her coffee across the marble counter. "2 sugars, extra cream, perfect temperature." "You're going to spoil me," she'd warned him on day 4. "That's the plan," he'd replied, and something in his tone made her heart skip. They'd fallen into a routine that felt like marriage, real marriage, not their business arrangement. He cooked breakfast, she made dinner. He did the dishes, she folded the laundry. They'd watch television together on the couch, sitting closer each night until she was tucked against his side like she belonged there. The pillow wall between them in bed had slowly disappeared. First one pillow, then another, until they woke up tangled together more mornings than not. Neither mentioned it. The office gossip. At work, maintaining their professional facade was getting harder. Everyone knew they were married now, and the office buzzed with speculation. "I can't believe you married Mr. Hartwell," Rachel Torres whispered during their lunch break. "Girl, spill. Is he different at home?" Claire thought about Dominic singing off-key in the shower, his reading glasses he refused to wear in public, the way he left sticky notes on the bathroom mirror with terrible jokes to make her laugh. "He's different," she admitted carefully. "Good different or weird different?" "Good different. Really good." Rachel studied her friend's face. "Claire, you're falling for him." "I am not. You just smiled like a idiot when you said his name." "I did not." But Claire touched her face, horrified to find she was still smiling. Vincent's surprise visit. That afternoon, Vincent Kong appeared in Dominic's office unannounced, exactly as he'd warned. "Don't mind me," he said cheerfully, settling into a chair. "Just observing. Pretend I'm not here." That was impossible, but they tried. Claire brought Dominic documents to review, standing beside his desk as they discussed the Morrison account. His hand found her hip absently, a gesture that had become automatic. She leaned into him without thinking, pointing at figures on the screen. "You're more comfortable with physical touch now," Vincent observed, scribbling notes. "Week 1, you barely looked at each other. Now you move like dancers who know each other's steps." "We're getting used to being married," Dominic said smoothly. "Indeed. Tell me, Claire, what's the most surprising thing you've learned about your husband?" She didn't hesitate. "He's kind. Everyone thinks he's this cold, ruthless businessman, but he's actually incredibly thoughtful. He remembers little things, how I like my coffee, that I hate horror movies, that I'm allergic to strawberries. He pays attention." Dominic's hand tightened on her hip, surprised by her genuine tone. "And you, Dominic? What surprised you about Claire?" The next morning, they met Vincent at his office. He sat behind his desk, looking older and more tired than before. "I suppose Julian told you," he said heavily. "The investigation is serious. I may have to terminate all current experiments." "We know," Dominic said, holding Claire's hand. "But we came to tell you something. Your experiment succeeded." Vincent looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "Succeeded? We were enemies," Claire explained. "We fought constantly, couldn't stand each other. But living together, being forced to see each other as people instead of adversaries, we fell in love. Real love. The kind that makes you want to be better," Dominic added. "The kind that feels like coming home." Vincent's eyes glistened. "You understand what this means for my research? If I can document a successful case, show that the experiment has genuine psychological merit. We'll give you everything you need," Claire promised. "Testimonials, documentation, whatever helps. But only if the findings are used ethically," Dominic added firmly. "To help people understand relationships, not to manipulate them." Vincent nodded vigorously. Of course, of course. You two have given me hope." He paused. "May I ask, what happens now? Will you divorce as originally planned?" Claire and Dominic looked at each other and laughed. Not a chance, Claire said. We're keeping the marriage, Dominic confirmed. Turns out I want to spend the rest of my life arguing with my wife. And I want to spend mine keeping his ego in check, Claire added with a grin. 6 months later. The dart hit the bullseye perfectly. Claire had been practicing. Still mad at me? Dominic asked from his desk, not looking up from his computer. Always, she replied cheerfully. It's how I show affection. He smiled, still focused on his work. How was your doctor's appointment? Claire crossed the office, perching on the edge of his desk. Interesting, actually. Something in her tone made him look up. Interesting how? She pulled out a small ultrasound photo, sliding it across the desk. Interesting, like you're going to be a father in 7 months. Dominic stared at the image, his expression frozen. Then slowly, a smile spread across his face, the real smile he only gave her, the one that made him look years younger. We're having a baby? We're having a baby. He stood, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around. A baby. We made a baby. That's generally how it works, yes. He set her down gently, cupping her face. I love you so much. I love you too. Even though you drive me crazy. Especially because I drive you crazy, he corrected. She laughed, kissing him softly. So, think we should tell Vincent? This would be great data for his study. Let's make him wait. I want to enjoy this moment, just us. They stood there in his office, the same office where they'd fought for 3 years, where they'd made their fake marriage pact, where they'd slowly fallen in love without realizing it. Julian burst through the door. Hey, did you guys, oh, sorry, are you having a moment? Yes, they said in unison. Cool, cool. Just wanted to say thanks again for not killing me over the whole gambling thing. It worked out pretty great. After he left, Claire shook her head. Your brother is ridiculous. Completely ridiculous, Dominic agreed. But if he hadn't been, I might never have married you. We could have just dated like normal people. Where's the fun in that? She picked up a dart from her collection. True. I wouldn't have gotten to throw these at your face every morning. You still do that? Of course. Some traditions are sacred. He caught her hand before she could throw, pulling her close. Have I mentioned today that you're the best thing that ever happened to me? Not in the last hour, she teased. I was starting to worry. Claire Hartwell, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. That's better. She kissed him again, deeper this time. Now go back to work. Some of us have a company to help run. Yes, ma'am. As she walked back to her desk, Dominic watched her go, still amazed that this woman, this brilliant, infuriating, wonderful woman, was his wife. Really his wife, not for an experiment or a debt, but because they chose each other. His phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. How's the marriage experiment going? Dominic smiled and typed back, better than you could have imagined. Thank you. For what? For giving me an excuse to marry the woman I was too stupid to realize I loved. He glanced up to see Claire at her desk, already throwing darts at a new photo she'd printed of him from last week's board meeting. She caught him watching and blew him a kiss before nailing the bullseye. Yes, Dominic thought. This was exactly the life he wanted. One filled with love, laughter, arguments, darts, and the woman who made every day an adventure. And to think it all started with revenge, a debt, and a crazy experiment. Sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes your enemy became your everything. And sometimes, falling in love with the person you thought you hated was the easiest thing in the world.